I've found in my life that life kind of takes you on strange journeys. And I don't know if any of you guys have thought one thing about where your life is going to go and then you end up in a different spot, but that's sort of what's happened to me. I started out going to a place called Art Center College of Design. Some of you guys might know of that place. I was going to study graphic design, and I did study graphic design. And I was doing this project, and I thought, any of you guys hear of Galco's? Galco's, it's in Highland Park, yeah, so they sell like 500 kinds of soda, and they're all in bottles. And the bottles really make the soda taste good. I'm not a huge soda drinker, but there's 50 kinds of root beer, there's 30 kinds of orange soda, there's all sorts of interesting stuff there. And I was doing this independent study with an instructor there. And I was going to do a logo, because that's what a graphic designer does, is they do logos, right? Or at least that's what I thought. And so I tried to do this thing, and I really struggled. I'm really not very good at logos anyways. And he said, this old Chinese guy, and he would kind of twiddle his thumbs, and he had really big thumbs. And he would say, Dan, you're just too practical. You know, you put yourself into a box, and you need to just go play. And you're so practical that you'll take the weird things that you come up with and do something practical with it. And I was like, wow, I don't know. I was almost about to, I was getting close to graduation at Art Center, and at that time you're supposed to be working on your portfolio, and you're not supposed to be playing, right? And so, but I took the chance. And so I started to kind of play around with bottles, and I thought, oh, you know, bottles are kind of fun. You can put them in different shapes and make little sculptures, and you know, you can light them in different ways, and that can be kind of beautiful. Then it'd be cool if, you know, you put all these bottles on top of the building so that as people drove by, it would light up, and people would say, oh, you know, McDonald's is next to this glowing place versus Galco's is next door to McDonald's. And then I've always loved, you know, blowing on a bottle and making that noise, and I thought, wow, you know, what if I could put a whole bunch of these things on my car, and it would make music as you drove along. And I don't know if you can see that, but it says, does not work. It says it looks pretty cool, though. So it did look pretty cool. I didn't get arrested. That was nice. So I thought, teamwork. Maybe this would make it work, you know? So I had my friend, and he would push it up and down, and that didn't work either. But eventually, I got the right angle and the right distance, and it made this beautiful noise. It'd go woo, 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 woo. And if you drove about 25 miles an hour, which is perfect. And so I thought, you know, like there's ice cream trucks, and you know that ice cream trucks are coming, and they make music. And so I thought, what about a taco stand, you know, a taco truck stand, and drive around and make music. And so in this particular independent study, it wasn't about finishing any ideas. It was just about getting lots of ideas out. And so that was an idea, and then I have a friend who has perfect pitch. So she can blow on a bottle and tell you the exact note or not note. And so she went around with all these bottles that I found and made this musical scale for me. And I don't know anything about music, but I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. What if you made a pipe organ, you know, out of these things? And I can't draw either, so it's kind of my little paste up thing. And so I didn't. This is sort of the way that I work, is I have no idea how to do most things that I do, but I'm pretty good at asking questions and not kind of being shameless about asking questions. And so I kind of knew that I needed a keyboard, I knew I needed the bottles, and there should be like air involved, and I didn't know what this thing was, but I drew it, and eventually after months I found out that's a solenoid, and I could go to a place and buy that stuff. And so eventually I ended up making this pipe organ, and for my grad show at Art Center, I had all this kind of weird stuff, and most people all had this kind of flat stuff that was on the wall, but mine looked like a weird scientist there. And what was cool is that right after this project, there was an opportunity for Art Center students to do an internship at Caltech. I thought, wow, you know, there's a bunch of smart people there, they're doing cool stuff, and I went over there and I showed them this thing, and there was a fine artist that was working with people working with lots of data, and he was coming up with new ways of visualizing lots of data. And I showed him this thing, and he said, great, you're going to do the exact same thing, except you're going to swim like an otter for half an hour a day, and you're going to figure out how transparency and iridescence can show lots of information. And I thought, wow, that's awesome. And so I did that, and that's a whole other story, but it was my first chance to work with artists that were working with scientists, and first chance, just kind of being in a science atmosphere. And so it really, I was really taken by that. I love the big ideas of science. I love, the things that they're pushing towards and just thinking about that content. And so it ended up leading me to this place. So this is NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. It's in Pasadena. It's right north of the Rose Bowl. Lots of mountains around. And there's 5,000 people here. And they're all doing like these amazing things. So a lot of them are studying Earth. We have a number of satellites that are going around the Earth and studying the land and the sky and the sea. And then we have people that are looking at, through telescopes, that are looking out at galaxies and stars far, far away. And then other people are landing things on other planets. And hopefully a number of you guys saw or have been part of this in some way last August. So this is the Curiosity rover landing on Mars. So there's lots of smart people here, and when you think about working in a place like this, this is sort of like your steps of getting to JPL. You're valedictorian, you go to prestigious places, and you're really smart, and you just kind of keep doing all the school, and then eventually you end up at JPL. But I was never very good at school, and so I didn't take that path. I had a different path, and so and I'm not exactly proud of this, but I had no passion when I was in high school. I had a lot of potential. I just didn't care. And so I didn't do all that well, and somehow I was able to skip out on things that most people take, and so I'm really lucky because that would probably be a black mark on my resume if I had to tell them what my SATs would be. And so then, I ended up going to Art Center, and that's where I really found my passion, and this moment of being able to spend some time with scientists. And so I ended up getting to have an opportunity of having a tour with the director of JPL. And this was like really, really cool opportunity, and I had like a 2-second opportunity to sell myself. I said, wouldn't it be cool to have artists working with you there, coming up with new ways of getting to other planets and stuff like that? And he said, that's great, I'd love to have an artist around here, let's talk about it, and then he left. And this is the kind of person that's on the plane every day and all around the world, and you just can't get a hold of someone like that. And so I've been sending my resume out in next day air because people don't throw away a FedEx. There's something about a FedEx that you just have to open for whatever reason. And so I wasn't around. My wife was. She went to go down to the place to send it, and they didn't have any letter-size envelopes. And a stroke of fate, they only had ginormous envelopes. And so she ended up sending him, this giant resume, or this giant envelope with only a resume and a little letter in it. And he got this thing. So I kind of called him up a few different times, and he sent it on to a few different people, and then they brought me in, and they said, maybe you could help us with animations or something like that, because the boss told us, we should talk to you. And so I said, I'll do anything to work at a place like this because this is really awesome, but, I'm not all that great at animations, and, see this bottle project that I did? This is like what I'm really passionate about. And so I showed him that. And then I obviously had done some things at Caltech and had some credibility with that. And so they said, we don't really know what to do with you, but we'll give you 6 months and we'll see what happens. And that was 10 years ago. So it's gone pretty well. And so when I first got there, I could really kind of do whatever I wanted. I was called the artist in residence at the time. And so that was a great opportunity, especially for a graphic designer, to kind of get to go in there and do stuff. And so at the time, they were really interested, and now they still are, in finding planets around other stars. And that's all Star Trek-y, right? I mean, we know we have planets around the sun, and then we even call planets not planets anymore, like Pluto, unfortunately. But to actually find planets around other stars is kind of wild. And then to try to find Earth-like planets around other stars is even crazier. And they would give me all these numbers and billions and trillions and stuff, and it didn't make any sense to me because if you remember, I wasn't all that great with math. And so I would have to create something for me to actually help me understand what they were talking about. And so go on a little journey with me here. So if you have a grain of sand, and that's a galaxy, so we're in the Milky Way galaxy. There's billions and billions of stars in our Milky Way galaxy. You need 6 rooms full of sand to show all the galaxies that we know about. And that's just the ones that we know about. So that's like a lot, right? So I would have lots of sand in a room, and then I would take a single grain of sand that represented our galaxy, our Milky Way galaxy. And what's cool about being at JPL is you can go to someone with a grain of sand and ask them, can you drill a hole into a grain of sand for me? And they said yes. So that was really cool. It actually was a lot of work. My eye still hurts from looking through a loop trying to find the perfect grains of sand because it couldn't be too thick and it had to be kind of oval and stuff like that. But anyways, yeah, so if this were our galaxy, we found hundreds and hundreds, like 850 planets are within this little teeny tiny area of our galaxy. And most of those are really big things that are easier to see. And so we're going to find thousands and thousands more planets within this little tiny area of our galaxy over the next few years. And then let alone the rest of that galaxy, let alone the rest of that 6 roomfuls of sand. And so these are the types of things that I love to be able to create experiences for people. And I love to be able to give people a moment of awe about the universe that we live in. So that's sort of my passion. And so, you know, I'd have all the sand around, and you'd look through the magnifying glass and either feel really small or, you know, everyone kind of has a different perspective on what that means to them. I also put together another installation here. This is also about planet finding. So that's really hard, right? So stars are really, really big and bright, and the things that we're looking for are really, really small and dim in comparison. So what I do is I have a really, really bright projector, and it's projecting this kind of yellow, reddish, pixely thing that sort of feels like you're standing next to the sun. And at the same time, I'm projecting another movie that's just with a really, really dim projector on the same surface. And the really bright one is about waist high and centered, and the other one is way at an angle. And so you're, when you walk out there, you block out the really bright light, and within your shadow you can see the actual movie. And what's cool is that when people walk up to this thing, they have no idea. All they see is kind of the red, yellow, pixely thing, but people love to do shadow puppets. And so someone eventually is going to, you know, kind of do this type of thing. And then when they do that, they see, oh, wow, there's something there. And then they kind of get their friend, they pull more, and then they can see more of it. And then every once in a while, you get someone who stands right in front of the projector because they want to see the movie. And so that's always kind of strange. But trying to figure out how that works. I remember one lady said, why don't you just turn that other light off, and then you can see it? And, you know, oh well, can't get them all. So recently I've been doing a lot of work with a mission called Juno, J-U-N-O. It's a spacecraft that launched in last August, and it went around where Mars is, and it's going to come back by Earth. It's going to come back by Earth in October. I think it's October 9th at like noon or something like that. And then it's going to slingshot its way out to Jupiter. And before we launched, the main scientists came to me and said, Dan, you know, what could we do with the spacecraft? What could we put on it that would be really interesting? And I'd always wanted to do something, and got people together, and we brainstormed. We just couldn't find something that would be like really meaningful and not goofy or trite, and NASA does a lot of trite things, unfortunately. So I didn't want to be in that group. And so I went home, and my friend wrote me up, and he said, Dan, in Italy, Galileo, who discovered the moons of Jupiter, and then he got in trouble, his bones are on display in Italy. And what if we got like a little fleck of his bones and put it on the spacecraft. And I thought, wow, that's awesome, And turns out that he has bones all over the place. So this is his vertebrae. His vertebrae is at the University of Padua, which is where he actually taught. He has some fingers at a museum in Florence, and apparently there are some private collectors with other parts. So I don't know, whatever. But so it's really fascinating to think about how do you word something. Because when we were first thinking about this, we thought, oh, at the end of this mission, what's going to happen is it's going to orbit a whole bunch of times, and then to make sure that we don't contaminate one of the moons of Jupiter, because those are really special places, and we think there could possibly be life there. We don't want to contaminate those places, but Jupiter is just a giant storm, big cloud, and so we can do whatever we want to with it. So if we threw the spacecraft in there, then we wouldn't have to worry about our trash. And so the idea would be, we first said, well, we could bury Galileo in Jupiter, and well, that sounds kind of gross, right? So that didn't work very well, and so we started to think about other ways of talking about it. And since it's going to orbit, we thought, well, moons orbit. He's famous for finding moons, so he would become a moon of Jupiter. And that sounded like really cool because that's poetic and interesting. And then he becomes one with the planet versus being buried in the planet. And so that terminology just like changed everything. Everyone's like, wow, that's really cool, that's great. And so we actually, the university with that vertebrae was like ready to pull it out. They're like, oh yeah, you want it now? And we know there's, in a giant bureaucracy, there's a lot of things that have to go on before you can just pull out the bone. And so we actually got NASA approval, which I was like shocked. I couldn't believe that happened. And then, so we were going to be able to get this bone, and then it turned out that the Italians had a camera on the spacecraft, and so we felt compelled to, get their permission, and the guy who ran their agency said no. And so it's just like, oh, man. And it wasn't even, I thought it may be because, the Catholic Church is there or something, and what's crazy about being in a place like JPL is that I got in the Pope has a scientific advisor, and it's always an astronomer, or has been an astronomer. And I actually got to talk to the former advisor to the Pope about this thing, and he said, you should just go do it anyways. And so I thought, wow, that's interesting coming from him, but so whatever. So the hope is that the Europeans may send a spacecraft to Jupiter, and if so, that guy may not be there anymore, and maybe this might actually happen. So we'll see. But in the meantime, I had to do other things, and so this is another installation that I worked on. And again, Jupiter, there's no land on Jupiter. It literally is a giant storm. It's just a bunch of clouds. And when you walk into this installation, it's about 30 feet by 30 feet. It's a little hard to see here, but you hear thunder and lightning. And there's giant thunder and lightning storms on Jupiter, like the size of the Earth. And underneath of the clouds there, I put a bunch of infrared lights. In infrared, you can't see with your eyes. Humans can't see it, but a lot of cell phone cameras can pick up infrared light. And so what we have is a bunch of lights that are synced to audio files and of thunder and lightning. And as you hear the lightning, then you see this sort of lightning storm that you can only see through your cell phone. And then we're trying to map the interior of the planet, and so project on it in different ways to give a sense of structure. And when you see it in real life, it's really mesmerizing to see the way the turbulence in the fog works. And then again, the name of the mission is Juno, and it's really cool to do typography in clouds. And just to kind of give you a sense of how this is made, it's not with it's not like a normal fogger. It's just tap water, and we have these things called ultrasonic misters. They're usually used for like Chinese gardens, and you just have a little bit of tap water in there, and then it actually vaporizes the water and makes this beautiful fog. And but it'll all stay within that container unless you blow it around. And so we have these computer-controlled fans. Worked with a guy named Justin Geyer, who is really great. He's a hacker kind of person that loves to put stuff together, and he worked on all the electronics. Those are all the, these are actually security camera lights. So if you're wondering if someone's watching you at night, take your camera and kind of look around, you might be able to see the infrared light coming from those, because that's how they do night vision types of stuff. Now, unfortunately, right when I came out with this, Apple decided to put an infrared filter on their camera, so that was a big bummer, but enough people have other phones and stuff, so you never know what's going to happen. So what I'm working on now is, or with a bunch of different people, is going back to this orbit. So it's actually going to orbit 33 times, and then it's going to do that partial orbit and then fall into the planet. So it really orbits 33 1/3 times, which is, the speed of a record, which is interesting. So this is actually a picture of Jupiter from the bottom. And so the idea is that we'd work with a bunch of musicians, and we would beam music to Jupiter, to the spacecraft, and beam it back, but encode it with information from Jupiter. So when it comes back, it'd be kind of like, and then we would put it on a hard drive someplace, and every time that it orbits, it takes 11 days for it to make one orbit. We would send a code to your phone, and you would be able to unlock one track. So you would get a code from a spacecraft every 11 days for almost an entire year, and then get music all the way through. So we're hoping that's all going to turn out. We'll see sequestration and other types of things, cause havoc sometimes. So we'll see what happens. So it's great. I now get to work with a lot of different people. A few people on the team with us, and Joby is here. He doesn't always look that way, but he's great. So he has a film and special effects, like old school non-CG special effects background. Daniel over here went to SciArc, and so he has an architecture background. We do a lot of different things at JPL, building new brainstorming centers and just innovative sort of spaces. And then Jessie is, she went to Art Center. She has an illustration and a, what's that thing called? Industrial design background. And then David Delgado, he went to Art Center as well, an old friend of mine. He has an advertising background. So we have like all these different people, and a guy from Belgium wrote me up one day, and he wanted to intern, and so he's here for the summer. So it's great to be able to have this team, and we'll see how everything goes, but hopefully we'll be able to keep growing and do fun, interesting stuff. Now, outside of JPL, I do a number of different projects, and mentioned earlier about the eCloud. If you know who Aaron Koblin is, or Nick Hoffermas, we collaborated on this. This is at the San Jose airport, and it's thousands of pieces of liquid crystal, and when you add a little bit of electricity to it, it goes transparent. And what we're doing is every 20 seconds, we listen to a different city around the world, and the weather in that city affects what happens. So if it's windy, it'll look like it's windy in Chicago. And if it's raining, it'll look like it's raining wherever. And if it's LA, it just kind of does nothing. It's the same. And Nick and I and another guy named Jamie Barlow just got done working on another project using the same technology, but it's at the Atlanta airport. And Atlanta is the busiest airport in the world, and they have FedEx and Delta hubs there. And so we wanted to come up with some way of celebrating this fact that it's the busiest airport in the world. And so every time that an airplane lands or takes off from the airport, we activate the sculpture. And there's sort of these two shapes, and one feels like it's landing, and the other one feels like it's taking off. So we get a live feed from a company called FlightAware, and so if a plane has gone a further distance or is going to go a shorter distance, it'll affect how much activity there is. So if there's a flight that's all the way to the Middle East, then it's going to produce more activity versus something going a much shorter distance. And a guy named Daniel Massey, he programmed all this stuff. This was done in Cinder, and what's great is that it was a previs tool, so we could have all these little aspects of tweaking what it might look like, but it also helped us. I think they worked with Grasshopper as well and was able to help us figure out the exact location architecturally where everything should go, as well as it actually controls the sculpture as well. What I love about the Atlanta one is that there's this mezzanine level, so you can look all the way through the material, which is a lot of fun, whereas at San Jose, you just kind of look up at it. My friend and I, David, we're hoping to do this in China. There's a university out there that has a sister school in the U.S., and so when I was a kid, playing out in the yard, my mom always say, if you keep digging, you'll end up in China. And so we thought it'd be really cool if each school had a well, and at the base there would be like a TV down there and a hidden camera, and so you'd kind of say, hello, 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 and have that well to shine on. So. There we go. Looking for that one. Thank you guys. Thank you. So anyways, I feel like everyone has passions and everyone has different skills. We're all like very unique individuals. And there's some people that have like super high passion, but they're just not very good at things. Or they're passionate about things that they're not good at. And like some people love to sing, but you really wish that they would just sing in the shower, right? So please don't share your passion with me. And then there's other people who are like super skilled at things, but they just have like no passion for it. And I don't know if there's anyone like that here, but I've met so many people that did things in their life because they felt like that's what they were supposed to do versus what what they're actually passionate about. And that tends to be people who are cranky when they're older. And there's other people who have like strong passions and they have semi-good skills, and then they just kind of keep working and working and working until they get to this like special place where they're like the experts in places that no one ever expected that there would be an expert. And those are the types of people that I love to be able to, it's great to be able to find those people who can find those two things and go after them. And this last thing is just a little analogy that I love to use. And it's a little hard to see here, but imagine that you have a little fish tank. So we have a fish tank, and we put the fish tank upside down. And inside the fish tank, you have like little strips of felt, and there's isopropyl alcohol on it. So it's smelly stuff and it evaporates really fast. And so you put that on a piece of aluminum. Sorry, it's a long story. Put it on a piece of aluminum, and then you put a piece of dry ice underneath. And so what's happening is that when you make a seal between this aquarium and this piece of aluminum and make it really cold, is that it causes the alcohol to actually like snow. So that's what you're doing. What you're seeing right here is a very close-up view of this sort of snowing or cloud. They call it a cloud chamber. And every once in a while, you're going to see a little streak. You see them every once in a while? And those streaks have this amazing story. So millions of years ago, a star exploded, and it spit out billions and trillions of little particles. And these particles have been flying through space for millions of years. Some of them get to Earth, and they fly past like the Hollywood sign, and if we had one of those things right here, it would fly through this thing and interact with the snow. And for just a second, you are the only person in the universe that's ever seen this particle. And I just love watching this thing because it's like these things came from stars, and I get to see them, but I only get to see them for a second. And each one of us, all the atoms in your body actually came from an exploded star. That's really bizarre to think about. And so it's just like this moment in the expansiveness of time that all these atoms, make you. And so it always makes me think, what am I going to do with my time?